Welcome to the Bada Bim podcast. Will you vote or will you not vote for elections in Barbados for 2026? He's digital strategist Luke Lascaris. I'm political analyst Corey Standiford, and today we're in the esteemed company of Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, senior law lecturer at UWI Cave Hill. Ronnie, what's good?
Everything's good. Thank you very much for having me. And I'm probably in the esteemed company of you two gentlemen. So it's good to be here. Looking
Really
forward to the
appreciate
chat.
you being here today to talk with us about the voters list in Barbados and any fears surrounding the voters list that has become an issue in and of itself for this election. So, Ronnie, we're supposed to be maturing as a republic, and we're having instead to be in the height of an election, hearing our Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition talk across the media about concerns and controversy surrounding the voters list. Before we even get started today, I want to let the public know that we want this conversation to speak as much as possible to facts. So we're trying to root everything in facts. We're going to retrace the timeline to start out. And even in retracing the timeline, I wanted to talk first and get your thoughts on how all political parties, use fear. We were talking about this before we came online. And Ronnie, Dr. Yearwood, was giving us his impression of using fear in elections. From my standpoint, that political parties use fear to control and massage public opinion. All political parties, especially around election time, in an effort to get a vote. You have the government saying you can't afford to vote for that because that's uncertain, the ruling party, and then you have the opposition parties saying you can't afford another 5 years of that because that's problematic. So with that in mind, is that something that you want to comment on as you give us just a look at how we got here?
I think political parties would do better to walk in the sunshine, and it was always a message of mine to walk in. I think you get more votes. People don't recognize. Nobody votes for fear. Nobody votes for the darkness. People vote for better. They want to believe that tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday, and the next day is going to be better. And if you had ever looked at the UK elections, David Cameron was good at it. He was always good at selling the message of the sunshine. We are going to be okay, even if it didn't look okay, and that's what people vote for. Nobody votes for darkness. Nobody. At the end of the day, if you look at the Barbados Civil Party campaign, you would recognize even then they might say, "Oh, you can't trust the other side." There's always that message of we are going to get better. You heard the Prime Minister the last few nights or so talking about the future. That's what people vote for. That's just the reality. That's our human nature. We want to think that life is going to be good, even if it's not.
You don't think people vote for doom and gloom?
Nobody votes for doom and gloom.
You don't think that? And
if Obama had run a doom and gloom campaign,
I was gonna call Obama and doom campaign.
Nobody. Tony Blair, go back. Tony Blair never sold doom and gloom. It was things are going to get better. That was the theme song. It was always.
So you don't think this
better.
controversy that we having now, you Luke? Let me get your thoughts. You don't think this controversy we're having now is like scaring maybe a few votes? People who are fearful that they might be disenfranchised or anything like that. It might cause them to vote if they weren't going to vote in the first place.
I don't know if it will, but I can see the fear within the campaign, like the framings of fear of the election can get stolen, which is already a rhetoric that we would have heard from global north countries and parroted over and over. We heard it in Caribbean countries too as well. So there's a whole rhetoric around fear that people like to deploy because fear is a powerful motivator, but I also believe that it is more the hopeful campaigns that do sell a message, but I will not deny that fear isn't there and that it hasn't played a part in this election too as well.
So, it's there, but I even let's take Donald Trump. Even Trump's campaign was built on hope. His idea was like, you're going to get more money in your pocket if you're a low-income worker. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure you're safe. Everything is always about it's going to be better. The economy is going to grow. What outlandish promises he made. The point is he was always speaking to something better. No campaign works. Like I've never. If somebody can show me a doom and gloom, like the world is falling, why would you vote for somebody
that was successful?
Yeah, why would you vote for anybody that tells you the world is falling and it's going to be worse? And how is that going to make you feel better about going out to do anything or to vote for them in the first place?
Take me back pre-election, because some of us might not be paying as much attention pre-election. You know, election time is when everybody's attention, everybody antenna up. So I want to retrace this timeline in terms of like what's being said on the BLP side, what's being said on the DLP side, or even by other important players that started this whole controversy in the first place. That brings us here.
So I think there are a few things that I've come to recognize, and I've been in a few chat groups about this. I think people for the first time may now be understanding how their country works, and that's worrying. That we've had elections since the 50s, and finally everybody's caught up with, oh, well, this is how election lists work. So when I'm trying to explain it, folks are like, but that's what's been going on. Like
all these many years.
Where have you been? You know, this concept of a list being clean. First thing, the electoral list can never be clean. Like, let's accept that as a baseline. There'll always be a margin of error in the list. There'll always be admin error. There'll be human error. You know, the moment the list is fixed or clean, somebody's going to die.
Yes.
The list is thrown off. Somebody's going to turn 18. The list is thrown off.
Yes.
Somebody moved from St. Lucie because he woman moved in St. Philip.
Oh boy.
And he got moved from St. Lucie, or he got one in St. Philip and then one in St. Lucie. So he ain't sure which house he registered at. The mail might go one place, then some bills go in the other place. Who knows what's
Somebody
going on?
get up and leave Barbados to live.
Somebody get up and leave Barbados. All sorts of movements are constantly, quietly happening in the background. So first thing we have to accept, the list can never be clean. So this concept of a clean, fixed list, fallacy. All right, accept that. Then the other thing we can accept is that there can be a higher margin of error. So if there's too many mistakes in the list, that's problematic. Over the years, how that's been dealt with is when you have functioning political parties, they take the list and they also engage in a cleaning exercise. So really, our systems, rather unofficially, have had this sense of checks and balances going on in the background. So the ECB will produce a preliminary list. The political parties, each of them, when they're properly functioning, get the list and they sit down in the different constituencies and say, Corey, you remember Shirley? Shirley gone there? Somebody said, man, no, Shirley come back. Okay, all right, we can keep Shirley. Yeah, Paulette dead? Yes, Paulette dead. All right, we can cross you off. Yeah, Miss Macy boy turned 18. Yeah, he coming up on the list. I bet that what this one, he ain't but he can live with some woman in St. Thomas now. So, and you would I know it sounds, that's how you would clean the list. You literally would get people in a room, each party, this is state secrets, that's what they do, crossing, cleaning, and then the parties themselves are checking what the ECB has produced officially. So that has been the process. Anyone in politics...
And they have to.
And they have to.
They have to do that.
Yeah, because it's also in the party's interest to make sure that the list is as clean
that they're as fair at any one time.
At one point.
Yeah.
So every party took it upon themselves to do that. So when I see a political party talking about the list, it tells me and it signals that you don't understand what politics is. One, you don't understand how the list has functioned historically over the years. So if people have arguments that the historical process needs to change, I can accept that. But do not come with false arguments about the nature of the list as if this is not being something that's been going on and has supported the proper function of the democracy. How all of a sudden the list is an issue. The list has been the list from the 1950s. These issues of having admin errors and people off and on have been going on for time immemorial. What happens is that there are always self-correcting measures to ensure that the list is as clean as possible.
Something has to give the BC work, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, work all year.
Yeah.
For 5 years.
I remember in the old days, you used to have the notices, they still come out. You would go to your community center. There would be a lady with preferred public glasses. She's looking very stern. She'll open the list. She writes your name and figure out if you're on it. If you're not on it, then you would get the form and you would go on the list. And that check-in process has always been part of the process. So I see people saying, it's not on the burden is not on citizens to check whether they're on the list. And I'm like, But actually, we've been doing that forever and ever. You know, I'm not saying the burden is not on the ECB to produce as best a possible list. And if the ECB is failing to do that, they need their lashes. Because if they've created so many errors, that's problematic. But at the same point, that doesn't take away from citizens going and which have done time and checking diligent and checking that you're on the list. When you become 18, you get your ID card, you go on the list. When somebody's dead, you do the process, you remove them. If somebody's changed addresses, when you're canvassing, you walk with your change address forms, you fill it out, you sign it, you carry it. You know, carrying it. All of this is just the dynamics of politics and the list. So I can accept we need to change maybe the process. I can accept arguments about that. But what I'm saying is a lot of people are arguing, and I've come to realize there has been a certain misunderstanding or no, they've never paid. This is the first time that they're actually aware and start having gone like, wait, this is
what happened, and but then that means that when somebody brings an argument that you weren't prepared for, you're caught off guard. You actually could believe it, and then the absence of evidence, not to get too technical sounding, but the absence of evidence is presented as evidence, and you don't know any better if you don't know the situation.
Exactly, and I think that's what's happening. So you get this idea, the ECB is trying to disenfranchise. I'm like, no, that is not correct. The ECB is not disenfranchising.
But look, I want to put to you, can the argument not be made that this whole controversy in the first place, the basis upon which the leader of the DLP is able to get up and claim that there's wrongdoing and then create a question mark as to whether there's wrongdoing, couldn't we not make an argument that all this is happening because we're going to the polls in 4 years now instead of 5? Because it's being done strategically now. The elections are being called more strategically than they are in the past. So then there's this impression that things are being rushed, and they're being rushed so that these names could be taken off the list and people don't get a chance to fix them. If we had the 5 years like we normally do, that would be less of an argument. What do you think about that?
I mean, I do get the argument. I do hear it. That because people feel that it's been sped up now under more of the administrations, that she don't run you down to the way, like Frondell, like
but nobody wants that.
But nobody wants that. That's what I think.
Let Parliament dissolve itself.
Exactly. Yeah. We can't do that again. Nobody can go to the wire.
That. Yeah, I don't. It is unnecessary, but I think that I do get the way that people will feel as though it's a process that's being rushed, and then it creates the landscape, the environment, then for political parties to say, "Oh, you're rushing we out. Are you trying to get we when we not together, but you always have a very cohesive product? Are you trying to do trickery?" Or what I'm beginning to find is that the parties are coming out, our opposition parties are coming out and assigning blame and assigning wrongdoing where there's none, and the burden of proof doesn't exist, so they don't have to prove it, they just have to say it.
Yeah.
And then it enters the landscape and creates the doubt and muddies the water, and then it's hard then to overcome that, to prove it, because it's like, what they say that
right. You're already in a finite time period because the election is approaching. Every day that passes, every minute, every hour, really, you're getting closer to the election, and you're having to then fix that and come around that. I feel for the EBC having to respond to these public statements and becoming embattled in a situation when they probably shouldn't, and having to argue, well, this information was really out since June last year, and then the notice was put back out in 2 weeks, and make those sort of statements, and then it's like, you having to not argue literally speaking, but you're having to present arguments to citizens who had the opportunity to do things. But as Ronnie was pointing out, I ain't allowed to call you Ronnie, or I'm supposed to call you not here, but I just joking. He always takes me to task when you're not on air with us referring to you as Ronnie, but we call all the leaders and past leaders by the first name.
No, this Ronnie, and I live in the world of academia. That is where I am.
But as you were saying, then you have this situation where you have people who are now becoming au fait, and they're feeling as though because the election is here, something is being taken from me, although this opportunity was available to them to check the list.
And I think that
all this playing me past.
That's unfortunate. And I think there are two things happen here. There's this argument about Barbados doesn't have a constitution.
Oh God.
We
could spend a whole episode.
Yeah, that really riles me up.
Yeah, it riles me up too as well.
And then I find what's nested now is this whole electoral fraud within that. So people will say, "Well, Barbados doesn't have a constitution. How are you calling election?" The two are being connected now. So you're getting all of these arguments. And I'm like, well, these things don't. Where is the evidence? One, that we don't have a constitution. Two, where's the evidence that some kind of misnomers or something is going on with the election that normally does not happen during the electoral process? And I don't think that the elections, and I know this may sound controversial, were called early or anything. No, the elections, if you look at the time frame, when were the elections going to be called? There's no other real time, because you definitely can't call them during estimates.
You can't call them.
You can't call them during crop over.
You can't call them during crop over.
Or then you wait till children going back to school.
You can't call them
September. You can't call them
don't
October.
Don't interrupt my ham or turkey in December.
Because October is what, food and rum.
Right.
Can't call them in November
That's
because that's the 60th anniversary of independence.
Nope. So
can't call them in December because then that'll be a confusion.
You be January next year.
So we'll be exactly back up to the line, and there's no way that the Prime Minister was going. This Prime Minister is going to the line, given what the experiences and how Barbadians punished
so very right
our government from going to the line. So really, it was now or next year, and it wasn't going to happen next year. So it had to be now. So if you were a political party, we just sat down here and worked it out. You're telling me that you could not have prepared and readied yourself because there are only so many possibilities that when the election was going to be called. So you had to know the election was coming around this time period. So from September last year, you should have been ready.
I do understand though voters who like that argument, because we are people who pay attention for our reasons. But I do understand there are also voters out there who that argument won't hold any water, that they had to have known. They weren't paying attention. So when you say to them that they had to have known, it's like, no, it's something.
I mean the political parties. I know the voters.
Parties.
Yeah, the parties should have known. I know when you're talking about voters, because voters don't pay attention. People dip in and dip out of politics. And sometimes you feel they know something they don't, because they're like, well, that's, you got the kids to carry school, you got everyone pick up your mother. All sorts of things going on in life.
Political parties knew.
But political parties, yes, they should be ready. So when we look at the law around the elections, it is clear the ECB, ABC is supposed to send out notices. And when you go through the law, there are periods in which they send out notices. They're supposed to do the preliminary list. So all the notices and stuff made out last year, you're supposed to publish them.
Follow the protocols.
And I think from looking out, they followed the protocol. Now, obviously, the prelim list, because they were going through a clean exercise, some people were knocked off the list. They published 8,000, and then within that 8,000, some people were supposed to be on and off. And right now, still nobody can tell me what that number is. All I'm getting is a lot of feelings. I hear somebody get knocked off.
Feelings.
I hear. And I'm like, how many?
Running with hearsay.
How many? 10%, 5% electorate, 2% electorate, 1%. Give me some numbers. And even if you start say, okay, there's 8,000 people that were part of that cleanup exercise. What percentage is 8,000 of a voting population of over 100,000? And then you break it down. Can it make a difference to affect the outcome of the election?
You spread it across the constituencies. Or if I would be devil's advocate and say, given the percentage support that the Democratic Labour Party was able to achieve in the last election, the ground that they needed to make up just to be on par with the Barbados Labour Party, it gets even more dire, but nobody will go there. But I just putting that on the table.
Exactly. So when you start breaking this down logically in the numbers, you're like, does it affect the upcoming election likelihood? No, it doesn't. Are people feeling disenfranchised? Yes. And that is a problem. And I think, the government, the Electoral Bonus Commission, needs to handle that in a head-on way. I don't think that their approach...
the current approach that they're using is not good enough.
It's not good enough.
What more is it that they need to do that?
They needed to be clear. Look, we followed the law. This is what we were supposed to do. We sent the notices. We are sorry if you did not engage with the notices. And then we have to come up with a way to get the people who were saying that they should be on the list within the remit of the law, because you can't move some of these dates around because they're fixed in law. These things cannot change. Elections are already being called. You're not going to move an election date. Unheard of.
Yeah,
Madness.
that's like
not happening.
I'm glad you spoke to that, because that cannot happen at all. It doesn't,
and it should not happen.
It doesn't function at all.
Should not happen.
Occur.
It sounds like a nice idea in people's heads.
It
a little bit more time.
No. There's some things you can't.
2 weeks.
No. And I think what they're going to have to do is maybe just in a practical way deal with people who were supposed to be on the list. And if you turn up and you have the evidence, your ID card, where you live, they're going to have some cross-referencing going on the day to ensure that people who should be there and who felt like, I didn't get time to go and check, that they can still vote and they're not disenfranchised. Is that 100 people? Is it 200? I can't. Nobody's told me a number. All I'm hearing is a lot of people. People message me. How many people message you? people calling me.
People.
How many people call you? So I think the Electoral Bonus Commission is going to have to come up with some mechanism within the four corners of the representation the People's Act and the Constitution. They're going to have to think, how best can we resolve this on a technical manner without affecting the rules that there's a list of eligible voters that's published, and that is what we use to decide who can and who can't vote. You have to be on
quick sidebar, Luke. I find it real funny that we in the height of election, we were here on Monday, was that whichever day that was this week, Tuesday, that we recorded with Devon Ronnie talking about voter apathy on the one side. So you have a segment of the population that says they're not interested, they're not participating this time, they're not getting my vote, blah blah blah. You know the rhetoric. Then on the flip side of that, we having this huge emotion, this huge outlay of emotion with regard to the possibility of voting. You don't find the two? It's almost like two contrasting images. Disinterest in theory, and then on the other hand, huge interest on this idea of being taken out.
I think that people want to be included, so you want to know it's there, and that you have the option to, and you can if you want to. But again, it's the same thing we would have spoken about last episode. When you showed up us, well, I'm voting, and you feel that you're doing something by saying that I'm voting, I'm getting out there, that don't represent me. So you feel, you've made your statement, you set your message, but if it's taken from you, then it's a different story, or you don't feel that it's an option.
Are people apathetic?
Are they?
And I'm going to just come out this left field. Are people apathetic, or is there nothing to vote for? They're two very different things. Two very different things.
That is an incredible question.
Apathy is one thing, but actually, if there are no choices,
or I feel the election already won.
Yeah.
I feel the outcome thing, and I don't feel my vote
I'm
makes a
coming
difference.
across a lot of young people who feel that there's nothing to vote for.
There's nothing to vote for.
Yeah, so
why bother?
Why am I bothering?
You coming across people too?
Exactly. You see, a classic beating. How many?
Defense, I have met so far. I've met two 25-year-old men.
I love it. You're in numbers.
From which you base your assessment.
I base this is evidence-based assessment.
You're extrapolating that.
Three, yes.
Three.
I've met multiple people online saying this, but these three that I have specifically spoken to, three young men. One in St. Philip. Is that North? Is that Sonia, Dr. Brown's?
Yes.
St. Philip North. I spoke to yesterday. He was saying, at least with Lashley, he has seen Lashley. He would have conversed with Lashley. He hasn't seen Dr. Brown. So it's like, and he would say like there are definitive things on the ground that he would have seen. Like last year, I think the bus turns around by Merrick's. She would have come. He would have put down lights because they used to be dark at night. He would have come. They used to play football. She created a field, all that type of stuff. So then that is, I guess, what Dr. Brown has to contend with.
And that's tangible for a young
person.
person.
That's tangible, yeah. And that, because these are, again, real world lived experiences. So all the type of stuff, well, let's say for argument's sake, Bridgetown Initiative and all that, they don't see that as being impactful in their day-to-day life. but the bus turn around down the road and I get off there and it's dark and they gotta walk home.
Because those are bread and butter.
Those are bread and butter
issues. People vote for those things.
Yeah,
Things that
exactly.
affect my life. You know, that I can get a bus near where I live.
Exactly.
That I can walk home safely. You know, I have a clean space to play in my neighborhood.
We got play, we got thing that we could go down to. He come and he do out the field for we. He put up lights. And I feel good about that.
Two things, Ronnie, Dr. Yearwood.
Ronnie is fine.
I just being facetious. Two things though. We've had the Prime Minister speak to, and also leader of the opposition speak to the makeup of the EBC in terms of representation for the two parties. Is that something you can speak to? And in speaking to it, we've had Ralph Thorne claiming that he will take the government to court if anybody is disenfranchised for the voter list. So I want to know, if that were to happen, we were to have that eventuality, because it could also just be being put out there to massage public opinion. If that were to happen, how much of a case would he have in terms of evidence?
So it would be a very complex case, because I can see folks on one side arguing that people have been disenfranchised because you're on the list.
People.
People. But you know, however many people. So that's something that if I were a judge, I'd be like, what percentages are we talking about? Although at the same point, in principle, the law will say if one is disenfranchised, that's enough. Right. So the threshold could be one person. The one is one too many. You know. On the other hand, I could see equal arguments being made about what has been the real practical experience of elections and how we interact with the list. Whether that's written into the law or not, that is part of what we do. That's the convention of how elections operate. All of that would have to be laid out in a court. Then you look at the fact that on the Electoral Boundaries Commission, the opposition has 2, the government has 3. So if there were issues with the list and with the function of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, then your representative should have done that within the remit of the commission. That's what the commission is there for. It shouldn't necessarily have spilled out on the streets, and it would have been solved internally. So that's telling me you either agreed with the process, you sat there, because otherwise then you should resign. You should have come out and said, the commission is doing such, we don't agree with this, you resign.
Model principle. Statement.
You stick with it.
Made.
Exactly.
That would be a lot. Anyhow.
But the 2 representatives sat in the commission. This is what I find disingenuous, and this is what I find worrying. You sat in the commission, you obviously have agreed with what's going on, because you didn't resign, you're still there, still sitting down there, and then the leader on the other side, the leader appointing you, then is making these accusations. But where's that information coming from? But you're still in the commission. So if something was wrong, if he was correct, well, then you should have resigned a long time, or at the moment he made the accusations in protest to say, yes, I have sat on this commission, I have the evidence. Because where's the evidence? Well, your 2 opposition persons are sitting happily in the commission. And then furthermore, worryingly, one of them decides to go on the radio to air concerns when that should be happening in the commission. So that person obviously has no understanding of their role as a member of the Electoral Boundaries Commission, one, which is a constitutional role, mind you, and secondly, they don't have any understanding of how policy and politics works, because if you don't agree, you resign. That is part of our system. That is how you show I am not in line with what is happening here. I will resign, and therefore that sends the signal that something is wrong. But you can't sit inside of there and then complain on the outside and then go back on the inside and expect that it's going to function merrily. And then furthermore, the only person really who should be speaking on the forum of the speaking to what the Electoral Boundaries Commission should be doing is the chairman. The other members of the Electoral Boundaries Commission have no real voice or role, and that has been the practice to express a public view of what's happening. You get inside, you thrash your opinions out, and then the chairman comes and presents the view. Similar to cabinet. A lot of these government institutions work like that. The members don't speak. The chair speaks, you surmise what has gone on, whatever frictions you happen, you work it out, you fight up in there, and then the chairman comes there like, this is the view of the commission, we have and here we're going forward in this particular way. But you have basically members of the commission going rogue, which is problematic within of itself.
Yep.
And that should not have been happening. But persons aren't talking about that as if that's not normal. That is not normal.
I think that's that at the citizen level. These are things that are important to know, because I don't think the average person we don't think about the electoral boundaries commission anymore for the most part. Luke, your thoughts on what Ronnie was saying?
People really don't think about any of that, about any of the work that's being done, the way that the rules are constitutional, how it's supposed to function. It just gets boiled down to the same thing we talked about, a lot of feelings, where it's like, I get disenfranchised and I outed that, and this is nonsense and da 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 blah blah blah. Oh, he got on TV, Ralph got on TV and said this, and me and Tifa not election, we get vote. But is you don't fundamentally understand how anything works. You don't fundamentally understand how the EBC works, how politics works, how elections work, who's supposed to speak, how is this supposed to happen, like how am I supposed to be engaged with the process and not just sit back and come online. What was the date that they closed off? The 17th. You come on, you go online, you realize you're in the end there, and you want somebody to say, well, I can't vote, but then it's and
I would admit I didn't check mine either.
I checked mine.
I'm usually good at it, but this year somehow and I would admit I got the letters in the mail. I got the thing in the post. I got exactly. I was like, but this ain't money.
Most people.
I
ABC confusing me.
I actually opened it because I was like, ooh, on service they said the government back or something. I was getting excited. Like opening it, like that went one side. And that's what everybody did. And then eventually, like a day or two before, I was like, oh, let me just check. And I checked. And if I wasn't on, in my mind, I can't kick up a fuss. Because I know they made every reasonable effort to alert people to say, check to see you're on the list. We think and they sent the thing saying, this is what we have, the information on you. Is this correct? Basically. Yeah. And if it was I would have a chance to say, well, actually, I don't live here anymore.
Right.
Or I move out. Or, if you move somewhere, the boy would say, well, this come for you, Ronnie. And then you would go and change. So I can say, they made, from my experience, every effort was made. Then I saw the notice in the paper. I actually went and checked to see, not me that thing, just to make sure that I ain't
I checked that too.
Yeah. I went it was in the paper, like back to back. These huge. It was
on a Sunday.
Sunday. It was like 2 consecutive or 3 consecutive Sundays. It was there. So I just went and I was like, and I even checked for a lot, like just random, like a little spot check just to see nobody that I knew popped up, and I was like, okay, fine, cool, done my business.
I went on the website and typed my name in the bar.
As simple as
my
that.
ID number, and it let me know that I was on the list.
Yeah.
I checked to make sure that my polling station was the same that I always is. The information was right there.
Yeah, and I know some people genuinely have experienced difficulties. I know that. I know some people genuinely have been moved from one polling station to another and they don't understand. I know that there have been errors, you hear on the calling programs and things, but at the same point, how do we address them in a way that we're not trying to blow up the democracy and the electoral process that has functioned by and large well? Let's be realistic. BD, whoever, the electoral process typically works in Barbados. We've got experiences in Guyana, we've got experiences with other countries where we know when you open those doors and those conversations about fraud, and it never ends well, and every election then becomes this contentious process, and then you start to border on violence. These things, there's a slope that we could be sliding down, and that's why every time I talk about it, I speak about it in very robust and strong terms, because I do not believe we should open these doors. I'm not saying don't have genuine conversations that you feel that you should be on the list if you need to be on the list and you're not there and you need to figure that out. But that's very different from the tone of the conversations about election teething and things. Because once you open those doors, you really can't close them back.
Yeah,
the
true.
tip part to Guyana is, if you want a classic example in the Caribbean, look no further than Guyana, because every election, there's something. Observers coming in, elections taking 1 month, 2, 3 before you could even declare winners because somebody fighting up about something. Somebody was supposed to be on this and this, and we've never had that. Elections happen, the winner wins. The loser, if you're in lower court, you pack your bags.
And we just go back to
Gonna
work
move in
next
truck
day.
and go back to the exactly. If you lose, he was a lawyer. Next morning, Monday, you're back at your law practice.
Yeah,
if he was a teacher, you're back. Whatever it is, you're back wherever you are, and life goes on peacefully. The transition of power has always been a peaceful, seamless, almost uncontentious, so normal it doesn't even feel like it's happened, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be.
And I mean, listening to you two, like, I'm here conscious, and people should be conscious that taxpayer dollars paid people on the ABC.
Yeah.
All those circulars that went out, all that paper that they print out, all that comes out of taxpayer money. So
Yeah.
it's in your interest as a taxpayer to follow up on that, the level of effort that's being made to include you in the voters list. So now you were talking about observers just now, and I want to move on the conversation to the fact that this week the Prime Minister has announced that for the first time in Barbados we will have CARICOM and Commonwealth election observers, which is something that takes place in other places, like you just mentioned, in Guyana, but has not been the case in Barbados, typically speaking. So I wanted to speak a little bit about what they do, election observers, or I think what would be more interest, because of how our mentalities can be in Barbados. I wanted to speak to what the observers cannot do, and then I want to hear you guys on what you think we can expect now that we're going to have these observers. What you think the election is going to look like with their involvement, so to speak. So what independent observers cannot do: they cannot interfere, obstruct, they cannot intervene in the voting process, touch ballots, or handle election equipment. They cannot compromise voter privacy by standing so close to a booth that they see how a voter mark their ballot, nor can they record audio or video of private voter or official interactions. So, like, you and me in the polling station, we go to vote, we have a conversation with the person who tells us where to go, and cross off your name off your list. They can't audio record or video record any of that. They can't exhibit partisanship in any way, so they're strictly prohibited from wearing campaign buttons or apparel, or expressing support for any candidate or party. They can't give instructions, no authority to countermand decisions made by on-site election officials, like in a polling station, or manage election staff. They can't intimidate voters. I think that one is self-explanatory. And lastly, they cannot prematurely disclose findings. They have codes of conduct requiring them to refrain from making personal comments in the media before the official mission statement is released. So your guys' thought on what we could expect in this election now that we're going to have observers. How do y'all think that's going to look? Is anything going to change?
I doubt, unlikely. I mean, it's good that observers will be here, but I think it leads back to the same thing you were just talking about. Like, it really does, it feels like the beginning of an opening of a door towards a type of election rhetoric that we are not familiar with, that we're not accustomed to, that we know anything about, where it's like, ideas of fraud and, again, muddying the water and polluting the process, or casting aspersions on it and making people look at it sideways. Like, is fraud really occurring here, when it was like, that was never thought before, because the election process was always fair and fine and seamless. Like, as you said, there will be human error in some instances and ever so slight hiccups, but it was always done to the best of the ability of the EBC. Like, it was always properly handled. There was never any mismanagement. There were never any missing boxes. There was never any confusion. It was never, even in U.S. elections, how it took days before Trump was certified.
That doesn't happen.
Exactly. We don't have that problem here.
And I think the Prime Minister did something that was strategic, but I understand so I'm two hats. If I were in her position, politically, strategically, I understand why she did it, because it's to close down the argument, because she doesn't want to have she doesn't want to have to deal with the post-election delegitimization campaign that obviously may be coming from the opposition side. So she's like, you know what, you want to fight, go and fight with Commonwealth. Go and fight with CARICOM, because this has nothing to do with me. The process is being certified. Whatever their reports say, she would obviously have to accept, because you can't fight up with the reports. The reports are the reports. But in that way, she's saying, hey, this process is fair, it's open. I have no fear, or I have no worries bringing somebody to look at it. And we accept their results. However, The other side of my brain, the academic side, is saying you've opened this door. Does that mean now every single elections we have to have observers? Because once you open that door, it's not like next time now people say we're the observers.
Yeah.
Because now you know put that into the fabric of the Barbados political culture. So I can get why, from a political strategic point of view, it was done, but for long-term democratic benefits, is this something that we needed in Barbados in our electoral process? I see arguments that people say, oh, the folk won't get people, it doesn't affect the list, or they're coming just to look at the day. That's not necessarily correct, because observers observe pre-election, so they have to be privy to the processes before. So whenever report they produce and they thought something was wrong with the list, they would have to comment on that and say, given what we've seen and we thought the list was whatever, not to scratch, or it was generally okay for what we've seen across the world, because they're going to be comparing it, and this is fine. It reaches a minimum standard of threshold. We don't feel that even if one or two people were disenfranchised or weren't on the list, so to speak, that it affects the elections broadly speaking. So they're going to have to make some pre, during, and then after. And they're going to have to look at all the processes and laws and things. So the role is not, I think people see this observer thing, they're just looking on the day. That's an important bit, but they have to look at the whole process of how the election works and work out what's going on.
Well, it's going to be an interesting call, guys. I felt the same way you did when I saw that coming from the Prime Minister, that now that we've opened this door, is there any really going back? I'm saddened a little bit to think that we have to reach this stage where now we're having to do that to legitimize elections that have always been accepted up until this point as being legitimate. Yeah. So what do you guys think we can expect from the major parties going forward and the smaller parties from here on in terms of this voters list controversy?
I think it's it's a horse to beat, but it's only a horse that you could beat for so long, because like after a certain point it just becomes ridiculous, because the margin of error for the list is, I don't believe it's that big. The same thing we talk about the 8,000, and then I was seeing one or two people online on Twitter saying that they were on the list before and they weren't on it anymore for this election. It's like, as you said, that will happen. They will always have human error in those types of ways, and specific to that. And there are real remedies that you could be able to work around that, so that people are not disenfranchised. But ultimately, to that, I really don't see it. It shouldn't, as rather what I would like to say, it shouldn't be a problem going forward into the future. Shouldn't be something that could be resurrected in elections in the future, because I well believe that post-election that the controversy will be quashed, because the systems around it will be reinforced. At least that's what I would like to think that the government would do. Like, you will go in, you make sure, okay, like after this cutoff date, the same thing you're talking about. How do we make sure that people who were left off and who were legitimately supposed to be on the list, how are they enfranchised? How do we make sure that they are able to vote? How do we make sure that they are able to be included, even if they don't want to vote, but they want to have that, the option is there for them to choose to do it. And it's like, and that's the way it should be in a mature democracy. In the same way that we have constitutional reform, same way we have parliamentary reform. It's not that these things and systems, even though they work incredibly well, they don't have to be frozen in time. That you can make sure that it's updated or it evolves as necessary for a democracy, especially when you're facing challenges that bring the entire process question the legitimacy of the list, or question the illegitimacy of the voting process, because then it's a knock-on effect. It's not just the list by itself.
Yeah, and I think that we pick up where you left off, that it's not just the list, and I think that's what some people are missing. That any arguments about the list are wider arguments about the functioning of the democracy on a whole, and then you're spiraling out to questions about legitimacy. And the moment you start using that word about legitimacy of the government, then whether the government is there legally, and if they're not there legally, well, there's something wrong.
Then it's become dangerous.
You start going down some roads that we shouldn't be going down. And I'm not as optimistic on this loop that it will go away. I think maybe in a very Trumpian way, this will just keep going. Because people thought Trump's accusations about The election, they don't go away, because then once you have a group of people willing to just keep repeating it, even if they're just repeating it over and over and over and over and over, eventually some people who you start just asking a question, man, I wonder if there's something to this. Even if they know there's nothing, the point is you're hearing this message all the time. They're always on the call-in program, they're always everywhere, always on social media, the list. It might not go away, and that's a worry. And I think the government and the Electoral Boundaries Commission they really have to think about this and think about how they are going to address this in a real way, head on. They can't ignore this as like maybe a few quacky people. No, the same way that they've been ignoring the no constitution people.
I was going to
all of these things that people like, man, just somebody there talking ignorant. So we know, and then before you know it, a few other people start buying in. Then before you know, another few, and another few, and another few. So I used to think sometimes maybe you can ignore it, but I think some of these things you really have to address head on, because there are people who would come up to me and ask me if Barbados has a constitution who I thought they would never frame that as a question. And they're asking in a serious way, They're not asking it as a joke question. They want me to walk them through in a serious way whether we have a functioning constitution that supports a functioning electoral process. And that's usually the follow-on question. Are the elections okay, Ronnie? Like, what's the law? And I sometimes I'm stunned, because I'm like, but how is this become a question? Why are we not discussing the real issues? Transport and economy. Nobody's talking about the economy. Whole elections, I've not heard the E word yet.
Amazing.
If you think about it, nobody's talking about the economy besides thinking of VAT, but then small. I talk about the economy in its big terms, like what are we going to do for growth? What new industry should we have? Where is the economy going? How do we provide sustainable jobs? If you're not having those conversations, if you think about it, the whole thing's being dominated by this argument about lists and alleged fraud, but no evidence.
Distraction.
I think that's what people begin speaking about. Is like, we want real policies, we want real solutions, we want, again, bread and butter issues. How are you going to solve my bread and butter issues? How are you going to bring down the cost in the supermarket? How are you going to make life more affordable? How are you going to make things more accessible? Like, that is the real issues people want to hear. But all of it that we've hearing mostly about is like, you got the political fanfare, you got the political stunts, and then you have like nothing with regards to true policy conversations.
Yeah, we're not having them.
And like, I know the B's brought up, what was that, the A to Z list, and then they're supposed to be bringing forward a list of proposals and stuff for the future on, I think today's Friday, tomorrow that would be Saturday. But it's like, it is a shame too that has come out so late. And then there as always the questions with regard to the manifestos.
Always.
Where are the manifestos? And then like last election 2022, I think they came out really late. So then it's somebody pointed out to me, it's like, this is not a bug, this is a feature. Like, you are designing the elections in this way. All the parties holding hands together,
and they do it.
Releasing this slate.
And they do it. You can't give a manifesto the night before.
5 days before. People can't. It's a heavy document. You want people to digest it. Yes, there will be pie in the sky days. Yes, there will be some blue sky thinking. But I want to get the crux of what it is.
What are you going to do?
And then it's like, and now I find the language now also. This is a whole separate conversation. The language is moving away where people are coming and saying, oh, but manifesto is not a promise. Or it's not, oh, we never said we was going to do all that. And it's like, but you just can't, cobble together ideas. What are you doing with this? What are we looking at?
What is it then?
What is it?
Exactly. What do you issue one in the first place?
Why are we bothering?
Exactly.
So that there really do need to be conversations around the issue. And I would like, in a mature democracy, as we go forward, that we begin to stop doing this kind of like yard foul style politics, but speak to the real issues that people do actually want to hear before the election, like a month out. Let's have these policies ventilated. It would be good.
That would be.
And the only way you can get that is if you have fixed election days.
Which is a whole other conversation.
Because all the things that people talk about can only work if you know the date of the election.
True.
Because then you can have the month out. You know the election is on this.
You circulate among your people. You left out the dams. You surprise everybody, and them scrambling. You're like, hey, good to go.
So we have to have I believe in fixed election dates. I think it's the only way to fix a lot of the things. Because then ECB, for example, the electoral bond DBC, is not caught off guard. Everybody knows what the date is. We're always working towards the same time. So
you believe in moving away from nobody knows the time or the hour.
Yes. Exactly. It's colonial. It's silly. It doesn't work, and it's affecting our democracy. I think we've reached a stage we can mature beyond it.
Yeah.
The UK tried it for a while, and it works. So I know people like, oh, they don't do it in the UK. I'm like, actually, they did. They had fixed dates. It worked. So these things.
Some of their territories do it.
Yeah.
Bermuda does it for sure, or used to at least.
It would bring a lot. At least with a fixed date, you would know. Parties will have a set time that you could begin to cycle out. You know a set silly season period.
Yeah.
You know how long a silly season will last, and all that type of stuff. It removes all the guesswork. It removes all the questioning. And
I think that around this time is probably the best time, because as we just went
4 years.
up to 5.
You mean this time of year?
This time of the year, because we just went through the kind of social and economic calendar, and when you think about it, there's no real other time for a general election
because it's the same thing.
But around now, so this kind of period is probably the best.
Crop over,
back to school,
food and ram, independence, Christmas.
There's
this type of area where
this is the most free area that we can have
something
in election time. So maybe this is the time period to consider for fixed election dates.
Guys, as we move towards winding down the convo, I would just like to say, so far for me, the Electoral Boundaries Commission is given an organization that is not accustomed to having to address the public in this way.
Yes.
So they're speaking they come in, when they are making their statements via the media. It's as though we're normally backroom people, and we not normally have to ask to address the public in this way.
But they are normally
to defend this person. I know they're constantly.
If you think about it, nobody would never even know.
Never even look at it before. People asking me where it is. They're up in Warrens. Where Warrens? My God, but people don't think about it.
They're gonna have to snap out of that to bring what Ronnie is saying they need to bring to it, though. The other thing that I want to comment and say is I just find it unfortunate. I would wish. And I would wish that as a people we would demand it, that if we had I don't remember when Ralph Thorne started making these accusations that this is what was going to happen, but it started last year, and I would just wish that some facts were presented. If you can present evidence and we can work with that, then we have a conversation.
Because don't forget, the original conversation started, and I remember, and I remember this because I was disappointed with opposition in politics in this way. And I remember I commented on social media on this around the Citizenship Bill, and that the Citizenship Bill was to create a new block of voters in CARICOM citizens, and that they would be able to come and they would vote in this upcoming election. I was like, well, that's madness. That's not right. That is wrong. It is erroneous. It is not factually correct. Because when you looked at the bill had baked in periods. You had to live here for 2 years or something. There were different periods in which in order to acquire citizenship, and then that would allow you to vote. And then furthermore, Commonwealth citizens and Caribbean citizens, as we know through the case Ventus versus the chief electoral officer.
2018, 2013.
That was 2018.
And I remember the controversy.
Or 2022.
Yeah, you think 2022?
No, 2018. 2018. The case then for CARICOM citizens, they can always vote.
Yeah.
And I saw opposition folks going they're trying to pad the list, and I said, this is all social media padding. I'm like, what are you talking about? These people could vote from forever. It was always they could vote anyway. If you were in a CARICOM citizen, I think living in Barbados over 6 months or something prior to the you had these rights. So I was like, so this conversation was. People were knocking at the door of this conversation in many different angles for a while, and I think that the folk who should have been addressing it, yes, some of us as advocates and lawyers and lecturers who know, and we were just like, look, these are the factual information. And even when you were given the facts, some people were still coming back saying, no, they're true, they're padding. And I'm like, how? Nobody still can't explain to me how all of these supposed to be flood of Caribbean immigrants were going to come in and suddenly start voting. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. That is not how this works. And even when you go through the factual process, you're like, okay, this is what the law says, this is the timelines. People start arguing with you. No, the bones in Africa.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just like, I sometimes you're just like, you don't. I can see why you took a hiatus, Corey. Because you're just like, you want to be part of the public engagement process, but I don't know when our processes become this wild, and then people just say things,
right? Just take off on a tangent,
and you just say things.
Nothing is demanded to like.
Where are the evidence? Yeah. Where are the facts to what you
start a conversation?
What you're saying.
Otherwise, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, and they'll just go down the road. I have people arguing strong with me about all sorts of things. I'm like, but how?
How? Yeah.
And nobody can, and they can't explain. And then the moment you challenge, then all of a sudden you're a Labour Party support. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why used to be the head body out there, guys, in the government? How you mean? I'm just saying factually, you have to do these things from a factual basis. No, politics, you get your little jabs and you do your little fun, but that's different from presenting incorrect information to mislead people. That is very different. And I know that might sound weird, but there's a fine line between political propaganda, which everybody will engage in, and misinformation.
Yes,
there's a line, and I think we've crossed over into the misinformation rather than the good old fashioned political propaganda.
Definitely think we do, because it's like, I feel like what was it, the post-truth era? Like we've entered that, and then since then anybody any half-wit with the idea could come and tell you, Mia's, I don't know, she's going to bomb the fish off. I said, Lucy, that way you can't catch the fish. And then it's like, you don't have to produce any evidence of this, Anybody just says, it's like, you know what, and to go back to what you said earlier, it feels like anybody could come out and you get enough knuckleheads repeating these type of ideas, and
they're citizens.
Then
yes, they are
knucklehead citizens with the right to vote.
Voting citizens.
They voting citizens. They come and they produce these ideas.
Not have to disparage the people.
They come with these ideas and they say this stuff, and then as you say, you get it repeated enough that ordinary, let's say moderate voters will start to be like, I wonder what's going on there, and then they start to get interested. It's like,
enough.
Do we really have a constitution? It's like, do we really? Because I know I ain't got thing, and then and the constitution could get repealed, and then we got the new constitution as a republic, and blah blah blah, and then it goes down the road. And then, as you say, then the burden of proof for you as the person on the truth side, with the facts. So you present the facts, and then the goalpost moves, or it shifts, or it goes over here, and it's like, but they had this, and they do that, and then it's all kind of, you constantly embroiled in these battles over nonsense with stuff that doesn't make sense, and the real conversations that you need to get to, you're not happening at all.
They're not having the real conversations.
The same thing with you to want to talk about policy, you want to talk about strategy, you want to talk about the direction for the country, and you're stuck on nonsense with the voters list that has no relevance and no bearing, because as you say, even if the 8,000 people were some dead, some just get knocked off and all that type of stuff, how does that really impact a country with 200,000 people who are voting? Like, where does that fall within that 100,000 people who are voting age? Like, how does that work out?
Yeah, and I think, as I said, that is part of it, and I'm fully aware. I empathize with the people who would normally be on the list, and now they fell off the list and they missed the deadline. That is unfortunate, and I don't know if there's an immediate solution to that. Given that when you look at the Electoral Bonus Commission followed the what's in the law,
put out the notices, it sent the stuff, it did the thing. You didn't check until afterwards, when you hear people get locked off and you're gone on like, oh my god, I know voice, this is pandemonium, and it's like you missed multiple dates since well up 6, 7, 8 months ago.
They were minimum announcements.
I read the paper. Whose fault is that?
And I think that's where this debate is. Because some people are like, well, you can't put that burden on the voter because it's a right to vote, so that right has to, and I get that. I get the right has to exist, but I also get that there's a process to this, and part of that is on you as well. There's a relationship.
It's a handshake,
There's responsibility, and then there is the right as well. The two have to go together. Often we always focus on our rights, but nobody has that conversation. What is your responsibility as a citizen? What are you supposed to do for the country? Yeah, the country will do this for you. This is the margin. This is the column of whatever the country is doing. Free education, free healthcare, basic provision of services. Okay, good. What are you going to do for the country? What is your responsibility as a citizen? Keep your place tidy. Don't dump cars on the road.
Don't
raise your children well. All of these things.
Yeah, this is a novel concept.
Yeah,
a lot of people act like that. As you say, people believe the government or a country is supposed to hand over all these rights. I have the right to vote, but I don't have to engage in any of these processes. I don't have to do certain things. I don't have to pay taxes. If I want to throw my fridge in the gully, I can throw it in the gully. Somebody can come and clean it up. That's for sanitation to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody can clean the beach.
People tell you that.
People tell you that.
I can throw anything.
I got a thing.
I don't care.
Exactly.
You're like, but you polluting the water.
Taxes.
Well, I don't care. Well,
I care. That's somebody else. See, it's somebody. That's really what I believe. The fishermen out, the throw the thing off the side of the boat. That's for somebody else to deal with. It's really crazy.
So guys, we've come to the end of our conversation. I really do want to thank Dr. Ronnie Yearwood for being here with us today and really engaged in this issue the way that it needed to be engaged. I think we had a great one. You would agree?
We did.
I guess
absolutely agree.
Having thanked Dr. Yearwood, Ronnie, for being here, I got to thank you too. I really don't want to thank you for anything, but I guess I have to. So thanks, Luke, for being a co-host today and being Better BIM according with me. Like I said, it's a concept that's been around for 12 years now.
Yes.
Going 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah, so this has been our episode 3. We're looking forward to episode 4 next week as we speed along to the elections. Keep checking our socials, YouTube, youtube.com/@betterbim and on Instagram @betterbim.bb. You can check us out and look forward for future clips or episodes.